Hello, my wonderful podcast listeners. I hope you're all doing well. I hope you're watching some fantastic movies. If you're watching this on YouTube, drop a comment and let me know what you're watching and enjoying. It's always a pleasure to know. But as for today, guess what? It's another solo episode with yours truly, and we have a good one today. Granted, I enjoy all of them, so it's a bit of a moot point, but I really want to chat about some of my favorite dystopian films. And I'm not exactly sure why I gravitate so much to these types of movies. There's just something about seeing the world after some catastrophic event that I don't know. It's because it's something that could happen. And not that I'm trying to get all doomsday on you, but they're types of movies that you have more of an unnerving and visceral reaction when you're watching them versus a straight up horror movie that deals with the supernatural or monsters. I don't know. I think it's the truest of horrors are the ones that are a bit too uncomfortably close to reality, if that makes sense. So, yeah, I figured let's chat about 10 of my favorite movies that revolve around a dystopian future. And as I always say, I'm a fickle gal and I change my mind quite often. So, if you were to ask me the same question in about a month, perhaps my list would look a little bit different, but nevertheless, I love all of these entries. Some of them will be familiar, I'm sure. Others may be somewhat deeper cuts that I'm hoping some of you haven't seen and will want to. So, yeah, it's going to be a good one. And before I kick things off with my selects, let's quickly throw out some definitions of dystopian so I can make my case for these picks. I'm going to throw out a couple of sources. The first of which defines dystopian films is by Studio Finder, and they're great, shout out to them, but they say that the dystopian genre imagines worlds or societies where life is extremely bad because of deprivation or oppression or terror, and human society is characterized by human miseries such as squalor, oppression, disease, overcrowding, environmental destruction, or war. So that's one definition. Then, if we head over to Merriam Webster, they define dystopia as an imagined world or society in which people lead wretched, dehumanized, fearful lives. So keep both of those in mind as we go along. If you have a moment of, wait a minute, that doesn't count, I try to cover all of my bases here at McFly's Movie House, so let's get into it. My first pick of the day is going to be so typical for me, eye rolls galore, and I'm going to go with a classic by Andrei Tarkovsky, and that's Stalker from 1979. This film is loosely based on a 1972 novel, Roadside Picnic, but it's quite loose. According to Tarkovsky himself, the movie has almost nothing in common with the book except for the two words that we come to know in the movie, which are stalker and the zone. But yeah, so this movie is just such a classic. It's also the first Tarkovsky movie I watched many, many moons ago, so it holds a very special place in my heart. It's his fifth feature film, and it's not an easy watch. It really requires a lot of patience, and the story is one of getting to a destination. Our lead is known as the Stalker, and he guides people into this restricted site called the Zone in this dystopian future. And so we see him guide two of his clients. One is a writer out for inspiration, and the other is a professor who has a bit more of a scientific or academic reason for wanting to discover this zone. And so the stalker has to guide them there because this area is restricted. It's in this wasteland, and reaching the zone, they're supposed to, at the end, come to a room that exists, and it grants those who enter it their deepest desires. So obviously, these guys want to go there because reality is really barren and awful in the world that they live in. And to me personally, creating a story that sees these central characters wanting to enter this otherworldly destination is so fascinating because as they're nearing their goal, the men start questioning whether they even want to enter this room because this notion of what they'll find in there requires a very genuine and introspective understanding of oneself. Because if you think about it, is your greatest desire truly the deepest one within you? And that's the question. And I don't know about all of you, but I'd get pretty antsy with what I would find inside that room. So, Yeah, Stalker really does combine these philosophical and psychological themes. And within Stalker, there's always something new to discover upon rewatch, with friendly debates leading to endless interpretations if you watch it with friends. And, it's a dense film, sure, but it also carries hopeful themes, which is something so prevalent in Tarkovsky's work. There's always this humanist undercurrent to his work. And as he wrote in his book, Sculpting in Time, he claimed that the central theme of the movie is human dignity and how a man suffers if he has no self respect. And as for what the zone represents, he said that it doesn't symbolize anything more or anything else does in his films. And so he dubbed the zone life, basically. And I mean, I could babble on about this movie for hours, but we still have 9 more to go. So there may or may not be an episode on Tarkovsky, I promise. As for my next pick, this one has a bit of a Tarkovsky connection, and that's Dead Man's Letters from 1986 by Konstantin Lopushansky. He was actually mentored by Tarkovsky himself. And Lopushansky first worked in a theater in St. Petersburg for 3 years. Then he went to Moscow to study cinematography. And lo and behold, he met Tarkovsky. And so he served as an apprentice. Then later on, he was the production assistant on Stalker. And of course, he absorbed as much as he could. And ultimately, Tarkovsky really influenced his directing style. And you can really see bits of that in Dead Man's Letters, which was his directorial debut. So, what is the movie about? So, Dead Man's Letters was shockingly released months after the Chernobyl incident. And it's a bleak film where presented with the aftermath of a nuclear apocalypse, where the humans we see are living underground in bunkers, as the world above is obviously polluted with radioactive elements. And if these people want to go to the surface, they have to wear rubber clothing and these gas masks. And honestly, the images of people wearing these gas masks are so haunting. And so they're living down there, and our main character is Professor Larson, and he lives in the basement of a museum along with some other survivors. And disturbingly enough, he spends his spare time writing letters to his son. Although he has no way of contacting his son, he doesn't know where he is. So he writes these letters that aren't going anywhere. And he still believes that there are survivors on the surface outside of this central bunker that the people live in, but nobody believes him. And that's kind of all I want to say without spoiling the movie further, but this is bleak. It is a bleak premise. The way the film looks is also bleak. Everything is dirty. It's shot in this sepia tone. And yeah, you get these philosophical musings that seem to be inspired by Stalker, sure, but where Tarkovsky injects his film with hope, Lopushansky's version of this dystopian future is a lot more hopeless. The way the world looks on the surface and just how it looks below ground, it's all just devastating. And is the ending hopeful? Who's to say? I'm not going to ruin it for you, but it's a great little film, and it definitely wears the influence of Tarkovsky on its sleeve. So that's number 2. Next up, something a bit more familiar. It's a movie I love turning to, and my second favorite in this director's filmography, and that is Children of Men from 2006 by Alfonso Cuarón. Man, can you believe that it's almost been 20 years since this has come out? That just makes me feel so old. I hate it. But anyway, I'm sure many of us have seen this already, but for the sake of consistency, the plot, the film is set in 2027, which is a bit too close to our current future, if you ask me. And basically, 2 decades of infertility have left society at almost a total collapse. The environment has gone to shit. The economy has gone to shit. There's war. It's just all awful. And our story takes us to the UK, which is one of the few remaining nations with a government that's functioning. I say that with quotation marks because it's cruelly functioning, to be honest. And immigrants who are found in the country are either killed or arrested or imprisoned. So it's grim. It's all grim. And our lead is Theo, played by Clive Owen. And he's a former activist who is tasked with transporting a woman, notably a refugee, to a sanctuary because she is pregnant. And again, that's kind of all I'm going to say if there are some of you who have yet to see this. And it's just absolutely a great film. It's loosely based off a 1992 novel of the same name, but in the book, you don't have that immigration issue. that was added to the movie because Karman felt that it's a massive issue in present day too, immigration and also the environment. So he chose to include those elements as well, even if it is a dystopian film. And it's still uncomfortably just prodding at you and reminding you of the present day. And as I was thinking about this movie and reading some interviews as well, it's interesting that it follows a bit of a similar structure to Y tu mama tambien, which you all know I talk to death about. But so, what do I mean by that? Both of the films are technically road movies, getting characters from point A to point B, but they're also movies that carry that political and social subtext to them as well. And as Y tu mama tambien does the exact same thing, maybe a bit more subtly than this movie, but it's there. And that's the hill I'm dying on. Of course, we also can't talk about Children of Men without highlighting the cinematography done by Emmanuel Lubezki, who shot the hell out of this thing. Children of Men is notable for its many single shot sequences. And we don't have time to chat about all of them today, but they are bananas. One in particular makes me clench up like crazy. But I do also have to mention that the statement that all of these shots are continuous, that's not true. It's actually been confirmed that there was an effects team that combined several takes into these crazy long ones to give the illusion of a continuously moving camera. And I mean, it still works. You still feel so tense and panicky. And the reason is because it still messes with your perception of time because everything looks continuous. It feels like you're watching it all in real time. And because of that constant flow of movement that's going on, that's what creates this sense of urgency. And I think it's done incredibly well. The shots are handheld, which only furthers the sense of urgency and gives it a bit of a documentary like feel. So, yeah, Children of Men, 2006. Check it out if you haven't. So, that was our third. Next up for number four, I'm going to go with Piotr Solzhenitsyn's 1985 film, Obi Oba, The End of Civilization. And boy, howdy, is this one ever bleak, even for this list's standards. Although I would say Dead Man's Letters rivals it. Maybe this one is a bit more bleak. Watch both and you tell me. But Obi Oba, this is part of Solzhenitsyn's Apocalypse tetralogy, where he released these films between 1980 and 1986 in Poland. Keep in mind, in the late 70s and early to mid 80s, there was a lot of censorship going on in cinema. And Solzhenitsyn just worked around these restrictions. And with this film that we're chatting about now, this served as a political critique of socialism in Poland at the time. And I'm not going to go too deep into that today because obviously I'm not a historian. I don't know too much about Polish politics, and I don't really want to give you a massive explanation of all the symbolism hidden in this film because I don't know it all. But I'll get to the plot and I'll try my best to at least give you that. So, Obi Oba takes place after you guessed it, nuclear war, and humans are living in this vault underground. I will say, yeah, this underground vault is filthier and even more vile than the one in Dead Man's Letters, and that's saying a lot. But anyway, it's cramped down there. There's under 1,000 people, I believe, and their only sliver of hope is this story of a vessel known as the Ark, which is said to be on its way to rescue them. But people have now, for the most part, lost hope. And underground, you hear on the loudspeakers playing on a loop literally all the time. The ark does not exist. The ark does not exist. And so we're introduced to our main character. He's a government official, and his name is Soft. And his job functions to keep morale high and claim that this ark is coming, even though he knows and the government officials know that there is no ark. And it seems that the only people who are left with a semblance of sanity are the ones who work for this government. The majority of the folks that are living down here are shuffling along like zombies, piled up like rats. It's horrifying. And to make matters worse, the concrete dome that they're living in is at the brink of collapsing. And if it does, they're exposed to this nuclear winter outside that'll kill them all. And that's a quick little synopsis. Someone on Reddit said that this movie feels like the main character in Fallout doing a bunch of side quests. It pretty much does. But yeah, it's a film that really looks at hope and what that means to individuals, but also how it works as a political tool. And it's bleak. It's a film that's void of optimism. And we see how this idea of promoting this hope has completely backfired. And what are you left with now? Just ugly, ugly decay. Boy, we are getting a pinch too grim over here, but I mean, I did warn you all at the start that this was going to get dark, so buckle up because this next one is definitely the darkest entry on this list. And then after that, they get easier to stomach. I promise you, we're going to get there. Remember at the start how I said that these are some of my favorite dystopian movies? Yeah, well, I guess I'm cheating a bit on that statement because this following movie is one that I think is incredibly important. I think it's a fantastic film, yet it's also one that I probably won't ever watch again, just because I don't think there's any other movie in the history of all of my movie watching years that left me so empty and sad. And that feeling ended up lingering for a few days, actually. I couldn't shake it off. So watch at your own risk, I guess. And that's 1984's Threads by Mick Jackson. If you've seen this film, then you know what I mean. It's probably the most accurate depiction of what would happen after a nuclear war. Truly. It's done in a documentary style as well, which only makes it more chilling. But the film takes us to Sheffield in England, where we meet a young couple who decide that they want to get married because the woman gets pregnant, and they're kind of ignoring the signs of grave danger looming in the media because the US and the Soviet Union are at war. Although, even if they were paying full attention, what could they do? So, we basically watch the world go from, a normal world. Then we see the days leading up to the catastrophe, to the nuclear exchange itself, to the subsequent aftermath. And that's not all, because we also see the entire degradation of society for decades afterward. And it's horrifying. You can't really root for anyone because what is there to root for? There is no hope. All you can do is watch this carnage and it will just make your skin crawl, truly. And as I mentioned, this was directed by Mick Jackson. It was also written by Barry Hines. And Hines has said that their intention of making Threads was to show the actual effects of how this sort of catastrophe would look. Mick Jackson actually traveled around the US and the UK talking to leading scientists, psychologists, doctors, defense specialists, strategic experts, all to make the most realistic depiction of a nuclear war possible. And he does. He truly does. This was produced by the BBC, actually aired on television in the UK. And get this, it was later shown to schools for educational purposes. I mean, can you just imagine turning on your TV or having to watch this while you're in school? It's traumatic, and I'm sure it left a lasting impact. And it still does today for people who watch it. So now that that downer is over and done with, we're going to mosey along, keep these dystopian vibes going. Next up, I'm going to go with 1962's La Jetée by Chris Marker. And lucky for all of you, this is not a full-length feature film. It's only half an hour long, but it's hypnotic and it's a truly mesmerizing half hour. It's also the most unique entry on this list. So why is it unique, you may ask? Because 99% of it consists of still photographs shot through a Pentax camera. And then you get a narration done on top of that. And I think Marker himself referred to this as a photo novel, something like that. And it's an incredibly influential film. It served as inspiration for Terry Gilliam's 12 Monkeys. He loves this movie. He calls it poetic. It really is poetic. It's the perfect way to describe it. It tells the story of a soldier who is now a prisoner in post-apocalyptic France after World War III. Survivors live underground. And do you notice a theme between all of these? And there are scientists as well who are researching time travel and sending their guinea pigs to different time periods to call past and future to the rescue of the present. And of course, not all of these test subjects can withstand the grueling nature of this time travel, except for our lead, who has this faint memory of his past and a woman he has seen at the Orly airport on the observation platform. before something happened. He can't remember what it was. And so he time travels. And I won't say more. It's a short film. Watch it yourself. And I know, watching a film of still photographs may not sound that enticing. I had similar thoughts as well, but it just grips you. Just please, please, please trust me on that. It really does. You honestly forget that they're photographs since the film does such a good job with its editing to make it feel alive. There are tons of dissolves that happen versus these jarring cuts. And with these dissolves, there's a lot of visual synchronicity. So these compositions really do feel continuous, and it's remarkable. It's also a film that really relies on sound as well. And sure, we get that narration, but we also hear the sounds of chaos. We hear the sound of a thumping and rhythmic heartbeat as well. There's this beautiful score that's done by Trevor Duncan. It's hypnotic and it even sounds romantic at times, making me think of the music from Vertigo, which also held some inspiration here too. It's not an upbeat movie though, don't get it twisted, but it's a film that excites me with how it uses the medium of cinema in such a unique way that I really appreciate. And second mention of Fallout today, because yes, I'm a fan. The art director of the original installment of the Fallout series was influenced by the visuals of the technology in La Jetée. So geek out, if you will. I certainly did. Alrighty, gang, we are moving along to number 7 on this list. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this since it's more recent and I know so many of us have seen it, but that's 2015's The Lobster by Yorgos Lanthimos. And remember at the start when I was dropping those definitions of dystopian, relating to a society where there is great suffering or injustice or people living in fear because if they break the rules, shit's going to go down. Well, you see that here. And Lanthimos takes a darkly humorous approach to it. Weirdly enough, this is honestly probably the lightest entry on this list, but I love it. And it's still to this day my favorite film of his. So, bare bones of the plot, let's go. It's a near dystopian future where single people have to be in romantic relationships and they have only a short amount of time to get into them or they'll be transformed into an animal of their choosing. And so single folks are taken to this hotel. Again, I say that in quotation marks because they're arrested and taken there. And as I said, if they fail, they get turned into an animal and released into the woods. And spoilers, I guess, our lead, played by Colin Farrell, he escapes the hotel and he goes into the woods where he finds another group of people called the Loners. And they aren't that much better than the rulers of where the hotel is because the loners are quite literally loners. And for them, falling in love is against the rules. So it's not great any way you spin it, anywhere you are. And it's a fascinating film to me because it really pokes fun at our societal obsession with having to be in a relationship, not wanting to be single. Remember, this film came out, I think, a mere 3 years after the creation of Tinder. And when Tinder was first a thing, people were going bonkers, dating left, right, and center all the time. And so I was reading a press release with Lanthimos, and he said just that, not the Tinder thing, but he said that the idea for a movie came from a discussion about how people always feel the need to always be in a relationship and the lengths that they go to be in one. And even if the person they're after isn't that perfect of a match anyway, it's the fear of dying alone and so on and so forth. And that's basically the idea behind The Lobster. And you know what? It's dystopian and it counts. So that's my pick. Moving along now to, I think, what are we at now? Movie number 8. We're going to go back to France for this one with Jean-Luc Godard's Alphaville from 1965, which blends science fiction with the neo-noir genre in a result that is a dystopian world of Alphaville. And it's ruled by a computer, the Alpha 60. We meet Lemmy Caution. More on that in a minute, I promise. But he's played by Eddie Constantine. And he's a secret agent who is tasked with entering Alphaville on a mission. And he has to find a missing agent and also get to Professor Von Braun, who is the creator of Alpha. And Lemmy has to either capture him or kill him. And he also wants to destroy the Alpha 60. So why does he want to do all this? Well, the Alpha 60 uses mind control to control the people that live in Alphaville. And the computers also banned any emotions or free thought. The concept of love doesn't exist. And if anyone does show emotion or acts in a manner that's ruled by emotion versus logic, they're killed. So, and again, not too great of a situation. And along the way, our lead, let me caution, falls in love. And I don't want to give away too much there, but that's the story. Now, Lemmy, this is cool because this is a character that's been played by Eddie Constantine in the past. He's a very stereotypical noir trench coat wearing guy. And the character existed in British crime novels before starting to appear in French movies. And so Godard, ever the crazy guy, he takes Lemmy Caution from these very classic noir settings and then he just plops him into this dystopian future. So it's an interesting way to take these genre tropes and then completely subvert them. I think it's incredibly fascinating. Alpha Villain itself is also a very unique science fiction film where there are no special effects or props. Godard just plays around with how things look futuristic. It was shot in Paris, and he purposely looked for futuristic buildings, which were cropping up at the time. Actually, shout out to my World on a Wire episode because Fassbinder, albeit from Germany, did the same thing. He went to France for his sci-fi movie and shot in these locations that, again, just looked so futuristic for the time. But yeah, it's a wonderful exercise in creativity and things really do look modern and quirky until you pay close attention and you realize that they're just props of the time that this was shot in, but used in a different way. So for fans of sci-fi and the concept of Big Brother watching you, it's very Orwellian, and I'm sure that will delight. But also for fans of the noir genre, it's got that for you too. It's pulpy and it's fun and a totally unique take on the dystopian film. So there you go. Okay, the last two entries on this list are more popular than some of these other ones, so I'm going to keep them a bit more brief. But first, I want to highlight the iconic 1988 classic by Katsuhiro Otomo, Akira. And I mean, what can I say about this movie that hasn't been said before? It's a legendary anime. It's influenced so much, yet it still works and it's still just bursting from the screen with creativity. It's set in a dystopian Neo Tokyo in 2019, and the city is crumbling due to a psychic blast that was released by Akira, the title character, in 1988. And things are, again, bleak. The city is totally ravaged by protests and gang wars. And things only get worse when Tetsuo, a biker gang member, gains the same psychic powers as Akira, and he does not want to use them for good. And so we watch his former friend, Shotaro Kaneda, now scramble and work with the government, which is also corrupt, by the way, and rebel factions to stop Tetsuo and just overall mass destruction. And how wonderfully creative this film is. You get such insane and inventive imagery, like this ginormous milk oozing teddy bear that springs to life, or what's now the countlessly imitated Akira slide, where Kaneda slides on his motorcycle. And this has been done to death in the years since by I don't even know how many movies, but I always get giddy when I see it in this one. It's also just a hand-drawn technical marvel. So I can wax poetic about how it looks for ages, but it's just a spectacular film that honestly, now that I'm talking about it, I'm due for a rewatch myself. So that's going to be on my to-do list. And yeah, we've reached the end, folks. The last movie on this list is just energetic fun. I knew I had to go with something a pinch more lighthearted after all that doom and gloom, and that's 1981's Escape from New York by John Carpenter. Good golly, I love this film. It is such a blast. It's just so ridiculous. It presents us with a near future world of 1997 where crime is at an all-time high and the entire island of Manhattan has been closed off and is now functioning as a maximum security prison to the worst criminals of the country. And so the Air Force One is one day hijacked and has crashed with the president taken hostage, and we're introduced to a former army lieutenant turned criminal, Snake Plissken, played by Kurt Russell, to retrieve the president in exchange for his own freedom. And if he doesn't do it, he will blow up in 24 hours because he has these explosives attached to him. So not really a choice there, really. But Kurt Russell is legendary as Snake Plissken. He has so many fantastic quips throughout this. And the film itself just looks so cool. It's so grimy. Everything is decaying. It has this pounding synth score. But get this is one of my favorite fun facts. James Cameron was a part of the production team here, and he was known as like this resident genius on set. And he was only 26 at the time. He actually started his career working with Roger Corman, and he served as the special visual effects director of photography for this movie. He also did the matte paintings. And then 3 years later, he goes and does The Terminator. Crazy, right? So, yeah, I really enjoy throwing this on when I want some dystopian action that's also laced with some humor too. And Carpenter himself has boasted, and it's probably the best way to put it. He said, "There are no good guys in it, and yet it's totally entertaining." That's pretty much it. And that's all I have for today, folks. Just 10 of my tried and true dystopian faves. And you know what? I could always do a follow up to this if I haven't sucked the joy out of you by the time you get through all of these, because I didn't even list some absolute classics like Metropolis or Brazil or Blade Runner, even. But that's kind of all for me today. I hope you had fun hanging out. I went on a bit of a binge with these movies before recording. So I'm going to go watch some Studio Ghibli or something that will just give me a sliver of comfort. So until next time, everyone, bye.